All right, so it's 10 o'clock and I want to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Customizing Your Chat Device Part 1. My name is Courtney Mayholtz. I am a speech language pathologist and I am also the assistive technology consultant in the state of Georgia for Saltillo Corporation. And let's just go ahead and jump right in. A little bit of, I apologize. A little bit of administrative information for you to start off. If you've never attended a go-to training for you before, you have this control panel in the right-hand side of your screen. Your orange arrow is just going to expand or collapse that menu so that you can control, so you can see more of the screen. Everybody is muted. You'll see that green microphone button by default just to cut down on some of the background noise. We might go ahead and open it up at the end for questions if there's time, but know that you can always ask a question by typing it into the chat box here, and we'll be able to see your questions. I have our Kara, another Saltillo employee, helping me out today, so she's going to help me monitor those questions and get answers for you guys as we go throughout the training. So please, if you have anything come up, go ahead and ask it. So as I mentioned, I am an SLP and an ASHA member, and I am an employee owner of Saltillo Corporation. And I need to tell you guys that we are only going to focus on NovaChat and Chat Fusion devices today. And the reason I give you these disclosures is because we are an approved ASHA training facility corporation. So we're offering this training today for 1 hour of continuing education, or 0.1 CEUs. You do have to be present for the entire training in order to get credit for this. There is no partial training, and go-to training is time-stamped, so we'll be able to document and verify that you can get that full credit. And the reason for that is just to protect you guys and ourselves if we ever got audited. The next, I'd like to know a little bit about who is attending today. So if you guys could go ahead and type maybe in your chat box. If you're an SLP, a teacher, parent, let me know a little bit about who you guys are. Okay. So we've got some SLPs, parents. Or other, I left out OTs, PTs, anybody, just so I know. Okay, well, we'll keep going. If you want to go ahead and tell us about yourself, go ahead and just type that into your chat menu there, into your chat box. Okay, so on the agenda today, we are going to cover mostly things today are going to be talking about how we modify the device. And in our next training next week, we're going to be talking more about how we edit vocabulary and customize vocabularies. So today we're going to go over, as you can see, quite a few topics: menu, some of the settings in the device, how we change vocabularies, copy it. All of these things we're going to get to today in the next hour. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and I'm going to split my screen here so that you can see one of my devices. And we'll go ahead and start talking about the chat menus. If you have a device in front of you or at your disposal, now would be a great time to go ahead and have it out. You can play along as we go through things and just get to know your device a little bit better. So the hardware, this is where the devices differ the most, and part of that is because we don't really have much control over that. These are Samsung tablets, so we're kind of at the will of whatever buttons they put on their devices. The first button that you see is the search button, and don't worry if you don't have all these buttons. Not all of our devices have all these buttons. So my device, you can see, does not have a search button on it, and so don't worry about it. But the search button has a couple different functions. It will stop your speech, and if you were to press and hold it, it will help you reconnect to your Bluetooth amplifier. The other button, the next one is an arrow. So you might see a little triangle or this little curly arrow. Mine is a curly arrow there on the side. This will function to get you back to a previous page. So if I was in a different page, I could just hit my back arrow to take me back. The home button looks very different. Mine is an actual button on my screen right here. And you might also have the circle or that little home symbol. Most of our Chat Fusion devices have those little circles or home buttons on them. It has a couple functions as well. You can navigate out of the chat software, or you can use it as like a screen wake up. So if I put my screen to sleep and then I push my home button, I can wake up my screen that way. The next button we want to cover is those two little boxes. You, again, might not have that on your device. Mine does not. And that is the recent apps button. The recent apps will, just like a cell phone or an iPad or any other similar device, you'll be able to see which apps have recently been used and close them. But my device, I do have those two little boxes, but on mine it's the menu button, which is the last button there on our slide, and the one that has the most variety, because you can see there's some boxes, there's 3 lines, 3 buttons. All of those are menu buttons that we have on our devices. So the menu button brings up your pop-up menu where you can find your vocabulary files, which options you have enabled, how you can make your device speak, and configure it in a bunch of different ways. So let's talk a little bit more about that menu. You can see my pop-up menu has just the 4 options. It's set to be the default when you get a device. This is what your device will look like. And the very first option you have is edit mode. Down here in the corner, edit mode lets you make any changes to a vocabulary file. And when I say vocabulary, I'm talking about these words on the screen here, just so we're all on the same page. The settings is what lets you modify different settings about the device. So we'll find that we can go in and change the voice, we can change how the device is accessed. All of those are more device specific. The library is the next option that you'll see. Library is where you can find all of the available vocabulary files that are available on the NovaChat devices. Each device comes with over 30 files, and again, we're going to go more into that later. The help button is also available default on your chat menu, and the reason for that is this is where you can find your system information, what version you're on. So currently we are on version 2.13, and we do have updates every few months to give you guys new features and fix maybe tiny bugs that might come out. So you'll be able to find that information in your help menu, and you can also check for more updates and download them through that menu. The last 2 options on your screen are Word Finder and Lock Menu. Now those 2 you'll see on the slide say that they must be enabled in the settings, and on my device they are currently not enabled because I want to show you guys how to get those available to you. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the settings menu. So again, I've pushed my menu button and then I'm going to go into settings. This brings up a whole menu of different options and things that you can change about your device. And I feel like it's pretty friendly in terms of what tablets and things look like today. So let's talk about our first option, which is input. And the input time, in the input settings, we can change Timing. So button timing is a really big feature. You have a couple different options when you're talking about timing, and we can see the three listed here: acceptance time, release time, or activate on release. And when we go into that timing menu, those three options appear. Now, activate on release is set to be enabled by default on all of our devices, so you can see it's checked right there. And what that does is, let me go back out and show you in our vocabulary, is it allows you to kind of drag your finger across the screen, and it won't be activated, a button won't be activated until you release your finger. So just to show you again, if I start down here in the corner and go up to my word come. Okay. Now this is a really great feature for users that might have some motor impairments. Let me go back into my timing. So I see this used a lot with kids that might have cerebral palsy or other users who have some sort of weakness and might have trouble reaching those buttons all the way in the corners. If I were to turn activate on release off, just to show you what happens if it's turned off, if I drag my finger, is it accepts that first push instead of maybe that last push if I wanted that word and. So you can see the difference there. So let's go back into our menu and settings and input, and then timing. I'm going to turn my activate on release back on. The other one we'll talk about is acceptance time. Acceptance time makes you have to push a button for a certain amount of time before you can activate that button. So once you've checked it to enable that it's turned on, you can then go into the timing menu and set how long you want that person to have to hold the button. So you can go pretty long if you wanted. Let's just do for now 1 second, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. And I didn't even hold it long enough. So you can see you have to hold quite a long time before with that activate on release, the acceptance time setting turned on. And so I caution teams when they want to use this one, because teams sometimes tell me they want to use that for kids that might like to push buttons multiple times, like get. But I caution them because I say, how would you feel if you had to wait 1 second before you could say your next word in a sentence all the time? So sometimes if that's the case, or we're trying to get rid of those accidental button pushes, or maybe those intentional button pushes to just play around, release time might be a better option. Release time, my release time is already enabled. And what that does is it gives you a buffer time. So it will accept your first button push, and then you have to wait a certain amount of time. And again, in that timing menu, you can set how long the release time is, how long that buffer is. And I usually find with teams it's somewhere around 0.7 seconds, but you can play around with how long that is, if that's too long or if that's too short. So let me show you what that looks like. So now I can push that word get, but then I have to wait that 0.7 seconds or however long I have set my time to be in order for my next button push to be accepted. So it really does help that that first one will be accepted, but then you have to wait a certain amount of time. So it takes away some of that play time, or self-stimming, as we sometimes call it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my release time off, just so in case we get going fast and I need to push for you. Okay, so because you could see if I had that turned off, it will take all of those acceptances. Okay, so that's the difference. All right, some of the other settings in their input are going to be beep on button press. So mine, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on so you guys can hear what that sounds like. And beep on button press gives you a nice auditory cue that a button has been pressed. So when I push my clear button, you should be able to hear it beep to let me know that my button was pushed. And so some of the other buttons, it's hard to hear when it talks. Open. But on those buttons that don't talk, it's much clearer to be able to hear that. So it is a nice, like I said, auditory cue. All right, so let's talk more of the input. I'm going to turn that beep on button press off again. The next one is draw on button press. Now this one is already enabled and is enabled as a default on your systems, but you're going to have to turn off, you can see on the slide here, the gradient fill, which is under your style icons in order to be able to see it, or under your style menu, sorry. And so now my draw on button press will give me a really nice visual cue that a button is being pushed. Get. Because it turns that whole button red. It. Okay, so that is the draw on button press. So if you have some kids that are having some trouble, that could be another way to help them out. With knowing that they've pushed a button and communicating their message and eliminating some of those double taps, okay? You saw, if I go back to our setting menu and input, down here at the bottom we have a couple of alternate access methods, scanning. If you're on a Chat Fusion device, you will also be seeing head pointing. Those are much more advanced features and we don't have time to cover all of those today, but we do have a lot of video tutorials on our website to help you understand all of those features and how to enable them. Also, you could always reach out to your local consultant for that information. Okay, the next menu we're going to talk about is the speech output menu, and you can see it's right here under our input menu. And this is where you can change your voice. And whenever I had a new device for a kiddo, we always spent the first 10 or 15 minutes when we got our device and unpacked, we spent that time playing around and picking out our different voice. So if you go into voice, and then you'll be able to pick your synthesizer. Now on our devices, the Ivana synthesizer, and you guys can't see that, so let me show you that pop-up menu, what it says there. There you go. So the Ivana synthesizer is standard on all of our devices. If the acapella synthesizer was purchased for that device, you will have an option to go in and play around with those voices or pick the voice that you want. But let's start out in the Ivana synthesizer and just showing you how you could pick your voice. So I've picked my Ivana synthesizer. I'm going to go into voice settings, and you can see up here there's a gray box. That's a pop-up where you can then pick whichever voice you want. Now you can see not all of these are English voices or American English voices. Some of them have accents to them, so you can, as I said, play around and pick which one you want. Now we'll stick with Sally. And you can play around with the rate by sliding this bar up or down to make the voice sound different. So if I slide it down.
Hello, my name is Sally, a teen female English voice from Ivana.
It will make it sound different.
Hello, my name is Sally, a teen female English voice from Ivana.
So you can play around and really individualize your voice that way. Just a quick note about your synthesizers. If you are in the acapella synthesizer, let's go and look at those voices available there. You do have more voices available. You can see this list is a scrollable list. Right now I'm on Lisa. Let's try Nellie.
Hello, my name is Nellie, a child female English voice from acapella.
And here I can play with both the pitch and the rate, which will really help individualize my voice. So that is just a feature about the acapella. All right, the other settings that we'll talk about under voice are going to be these character, word, and sentence boxes. Now, right now they're all enabled. And so what the character one does is if I'm typing a word in my keyboard, it will speak after every individual character.
F-A-S.
Okay. Oh, let me finish that word. I apologize.
T.
And then if I were to...
Fast.
So now you heard it speaking after every word.
Put.
Put.
Get.
Okay. And then if I were to put this period at the end of my sentence, it would speak my whole sentence for me.
Fast put get.
Because I have all of those boxes enabled. So if I were to uncheck any of those, if I unchecked character, it wouldn't speak my individual characters. It would just speak my words. And similarly with those other ones, if you uncheck them, it's not going to speak after those. Sorry. All right. The next topic is the style menu. So style menu is really where you can change how the device looks. And I'm going to scoot this down just a little bit so you can see the top of the menu there. And we're going to talk about the speech display bar. Now the speech display bar is that bar at the top of the menu where all those words were going. And the first thing that we can change is the font size, and that's usually one of the first things that I change because the default is very tiny, like a 12-point font. So I go in and I have my users change the font size. So mine is set at 24, and usually teams pick, 20 or 22 or somewhere around there, 24. You could also, if you wanted to, change the font. So you have several different options there if you wanted it to look a little bit different. Okay, we'll stick with that one. And then you could also make it bold or italicized if you wanted to. The other thing that we can change about the speech display bar is going to be the text color. So right now my text is in black. Let me lighten this up a little bit for you guys. There you go. Or I can change the background color. So this is a great option for users that might have some visual impairments, maybe like a cortical vision impairment. You could really make this high contrast. So I could put my speech display bar to be black, the background, and because right now they're the same color, I do get a warning that saying that you won't be able to see it, but I'll go ahead and change the font color to something high contrast, and so now you'll see that all of my words, the background is black and all of my words are in that yellow, giving me a really nice high contrast in my speech display bar. So that could be an option and maybe why you wanted to change some of those features. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the style because there's a couple more options. So we talked about the font and the height. Oh, we didn't talk about height. So you can change the height of your speech display bar by changing the number of lines. So right now it's set to 1, but if I were to set it to be 2 lines tall, you can see that that makes my speech display bar bigger up here, but it also makes my buttons a little bit smaller. So you have to kind of play around with what is the best setting for your client. Style, let's go ahead and change it back to just 1 line. And the other thing I want to talk about is the speech display icons. So you have an option to put your icons that appear on your pictures or on your vocabulary buttons, rather, into the speech display bar. So you would just check that box to make sure it's enabled. And now all of those icons appear up in the speech display bar. Let me real quickly just turn that white again so you can see it a little bit better. And we'll put it back to black. There you go. So now you can see the icons appear up in the speech display bar. I've seen teams use this a couple different ways. One way a common way that teams like to use it is to work on literacy. And we have to have a discussion about, there is some research now saying that maybe using picture support like this when it comes specifically to literacy training is not helpful, and in fact can be distracting. So if that's the only reason you're doing it, we have that discussion about maybe it's not such a great idea. But I have seen it used in other ways. I saw a team use it for a child that was deaf and did not sign. And so they were able to put the speech display icons in the bar, and then the communication partners could come up and type a message to him into his device, and he could use the pictures to help him understand what the words meant, because he was not his literacy skills were not great. So he was really using the picture icons to help understand what they were saying to him. All right, the next setting we'll talk about is the system. So when we're in our settings menu, the very bottom is the system. And we'll talk about a couple things here, the display settings. So if we go into the display, the two things that you have available are to change the screen brightness. And you can just slide this bar up and down in order to change the brightness, or you could set it to automatically adjust, and it will use the tablet's, light sensor to go ahead and adjust. If you're out in full sun, you're going to want to turn your screen brightness all the way up so that you can see your buttons. And that doesn't really have a huge impact on battery life, but it might have a slight impact by turning it all the way up. The one that does have a little bit more of impact is the screen timeout. And again, I'll change that view so you can see what that pop-up looks like. So when you go into screen timeout, the devices are set to be on 2 minutes of screen timeout, and generally teams find that that's just not enough time, that it's a little bit of annoyance to have to constantly wake up the device, so they end up setting it to be somewhere about 10 minutes or 30 minutes, all the way up to an hour. Now, like I said, if you do have your device screen on for an hour at a time, that is going to drain your battery a little bit faster. So usually teams pick that 10 or 30 minutes, and they find that that is sufficient. All right, the other system setting we want to talk about is kiosk mode. And I'm going to quickly just show you what kiosk mode does. And we'll talk more about it later on. So you can see on the slide here that kiosk mode is not an option on all of our devices. So if you don't see kiosk mode, don't worry about it. There's nothing wrong with your device. It just means that you can't connect it to Wi-Fi because it is still a locked device. But some of our other newer devices are still locked, but they do have kiosk mode as an option. And so when you disable kiosk mode, it allows you to come out of the software and you're able to access the Android side of things. Now, when you're in a locked device, you're still only just going to be able to get into Wi-Fi in the settings. You won't have access. You can see here my device has apps, and I can access the Play Store and the internet because I have an unlocked device. But on a locked device, you won't have access to this. You'll just be able to connect to Wi-Fi. So just to show you the difference, when I am in kiosk mode, no matter how many times I push this home button, I'm not going to be able to come out of the chat software. And we're going to talk more about kiosk mode at the end today of the presentation. All right, so we're back to our main settings menu. Let's talk about data logging. And we have a training coming up on June 7th, so if you're available to come, I encourage you to attend that data logging one because it's going to be a much more in-depth training about what data logging is. So data logging, when you go into the menu, the first thing you want to do is enable it if you want to use data logging. And what data logging does is it takes a record of every button that's pushed on the device, every message that's generated, and it gives you a time code. So it really allows you to see when the device is being used, what buttons are being pushed, and what is being said, if anything, on the device. So when you have it enabled, you'll be able to tell that your data logging is enabled. If you look in your speech display bar, you'll see this graph up in the corner. That tells you that your data logging is turned on. All right, let's go back into settings and look at some of the other data logging features. You can use data logging in conjunction with Realize Language, and you could even connect your device to your Realize account. So you can see that my Realize Language account is connected to my device and that this is the person I'm taking data on. You can even have more than one person, up to 10 people on one Realize Language account. So it's really nice if you're a speech therapist, you'll be able to look at multiple clients in one account. And I do want to mention that the Realize Language, it is a subscription. It's $10 a year, but it gives you these nice, really pretty charts and graphs and pictures about when the device is being used and what is being said. And it's a really cool tool to use. But you don't have to use Realize Language in conjunction with data logging. So the next option you see is that Save Data to File. This will allow you to save the data to a file. It kind of creates a log here on the device. And then when you connect your device to your computer, you're able to retrieve that file from the device. You could then open it using Microsoft Word or some other type of file to open it, and you will still see the time code and what button was pushed and what was said. It's just a little bit more time intensive for you to look at the information that way. And then the last option there is the clear log. So you'll see when you hit clear log, you'll be able to pick from that pop-up box which person you want to delete. And you will get another pop-up about, are you sure you want to do this? Because once you hit that clear button, all of that information is gone for good. So it's just sort of a fail-safe. Are you sure? All right, and again, there is that training on June 7th if you're available to get more information about all the things you can do with data logging. It's a really great tool to help you guide your therapy. All right, selecting a vocabulary. So let's go out all the way to our vocabulary, and let's say we wanted to pick a different file. If we go into the menu and we go to Library, you will see all of the vocabularies that are available on the device. As I mentioned, there are over 30 vocabulary files available on each of our devices, and you can pick which was going to be the best one for your client. The files with the locks next to them are original files, and you cannot make any changes to those files. Okay, I'm going to show you the next. This is a scrolling list, so you can see all of the files that are available on the device. Now you'll notice on this list here on the PowerPoint and also on my screen that a lot of these files look like they're the exact same, but they have different letters on the end, you know, PCS or SS. And this is true. They are the exact same file, but they use different symbols on the buttons, different pictures. So the PCS symbols are going to be Mayor Johnson symbols or the board maker symbols. The SS is going to be symbol sticks. So like I said, these vocabularies are set up exactly the same. They have the exact same words. The only thing that differs is what picture is on the button. I will mention that symbol sticks is just standard on our devices, but getting access to the Mayor Johnson or the board maker symbols, those PCS symbols, is an additional purchase. So if you don't have those listed on your device in your library, it just means that you don't have access to those files, to those pictures. You still have all of the files available, you just don't have the board maker symbols. Okay, so let's talk about how you copy a vocabulary, because we said you can't make any changes to an original file. So you go in and you pick whichever file you want. I'm going to pick a WordPower 60 basic file, just like what we were looking at before. And so I click that, click on the file that I want. And let me show you that menu. And that little pop-up appears. You're going to hit duplicate. Now, when you create a new vocabulary, we recommend that you keep this information, the WordPower 60 Basic SS, and then at the end, you can put whatever your modifying or identifying information is going to be. So if it's going to be their name, their initials, you can decide what you're going to put there. And the reason we recommend that is if you did have to call our tech support team or your consultant and needed help about the vocabulary, if you've just given it your client's name or initials, you might not remember what vocabulary file you're working on, and that information sometimes helps us to figure out and answer any of the questions that you have. Okay, and then you just want to make sure that you hit save to save that vocabulary. So now let's go ahead and open that vocabulary that we just created. I click and then I hit open. Okay. And then that will bring me to the vocabulary page. Okay, so now it's copied. Again, if you are trying to make edits to an original file, you're going to get a box telling you that you cannot make changes because this is an original file. Okay. So there's always a fail-safe. When you're customizing vocabulary, this is where we have to warn you guys, there is no undo button. We've gotten accustomed sometimes to using that, whoops, just undo in Microsoft Word. That doesn't exist in our vocabularies and in our software. So you definitely want to have a plan about what you're going to edit, because once you take off pizza and put spaghetti in its place, pizza's gone until you go in and manually put it on another button. So a really great place to start with customizing is going to be the personal information or the about me, and the food and drinks, you know, if they have really strong food preferences, or maybe they have allergies and they can't eat some of those foods, take those foods off. We definitely don't want to give them access to those things. Similarly, the toys and their interests and hobbies would be great places to start, okay? Also, if you are using a core word vocabulary file, like this is WordPower 60 Basic and it is based on core words, if you're changing the core words on the home page, like eat and drink, because these pages in play or go to different pages and have different buttons come up. If you're changing those buttons and editing them, you might disrupt some of the links and make the file not work the right way. So generally, if you're using core, you shouldn't have to be changing the core words in the home page too much, more just the fringe words. All right, let's talk about how we edit a button. So to edit a button, you push your menu button, you select edit mode, and you have a couple different things happen. This box turns green to let you know you're in edit mode, and you also see these red words at the bottom of the screen. This lets you know that you are in edit mode. And what it tells you edit mode, it tells you what vocabulary file you're editing, and then here in the brackets, it tells you the name of the page that you are editing. So this will change as we go to different pages. And this one is important to remember, this page name, because when we talk next week about how we connect pages, it's helpful to know which page, what the page is named, and how you can get there. So, all right, so let's talk about how we edit a button specifically. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit the My Name button. So I'm going to go to Social. I just navigate to that button. And then to navigate my name, I push and hold, and a pop-up menu appears. And then my very first option is Edit the Button. And that brings up a whole menu of changes and things that you can edit. And let me move this down just slightly so that you guys can see. Up at the top, there are 3 tabs that we're going to talk about individually. And let me lighten that up a little bit for you guys. There you go. Okay, so on your button, you have the label and you have the message. Now the label are the words that appear on the screen, and the message is what the button says. When I'm creating a new button, whatever I put in the label is going to be in my message, but I can go in and I can change that separately. So right now I'm going to go ahead and put it to say my name is Courtney, and I always include grammar just as a side note to help support those traditions and a little bit of that literacy. And then you can pick several different things. Let me, sorry, I realized that I was behind on the slideshow for you. There you go. So again, your label is what's on the screen, the message is what the button says, and then your image. So you can import images into the tablet by connecting your tablet onto your computer, and you can put images in that way. You can also use the camera. So there's a front-facing and a rear-facing camera. Right now it's looking at my desk, so you can't really see anything. You can see sort of my desk now. So that's my front-facing camera, and then there's my rear-facing camera, so you can see my hand and my document camera. And you can take pictures that way. That's a really great way when you're in the moment trying to find things or to get really realistic pictures quickly, is to use that camera. You can also use the find feature, and that will let you find pictures in the symbol library. So if I typed in a picture, I was looking for a picture of a girl, all of my available options will appear, and then I can pick which one I want to appear on my button. Okay. The other thing is visible. The buttons are default visible. If I were to uncheck this box, you see my button goes gray, and that means my button is hidden. I can't see that button anymore. So it's one way of hiding buttons that you don't want kids to have access to. The next tab at the top is the Style tab, and this really changes how the button looks. So you can change your font, you can change your font size, and then you can change the color of several different things. So the body is going to change the background color of your button. So now it's that nice teal. The font color is pretty self-explanatory. That will change the color of your font. Or you can change the border color. And the border color, so we talked about how you could hide those buttons, but you can also do what we call highlighting. So you can change the color of your border, and you can change the border width to make it bigger, and this will give you a nice visual cue and make your button look different from a lot of the other buttons. The transparent button is default unchecked. If you were to check it, your border and that button background go away, the body color. And now the words will still appear on the screen, but I'll just see whatever my background of my page is. And this is really useful for when you're creating a visual scene and you still want the vocabulary to be visible, but you want a picture to be your background. If I uncheck label on top, it just flips my label to be on the bottom. Okay. All right. The next tab is going to be the Actions tab. And the default on all of our new buttons that you create is going to be speech message. What speech message does is it says the words that are in your message, and it also takes that message and puts it in your speech display bar. If you wanted to, you could remove this action if you didn't need the button to talk. And then you can also add a whole host of other actions. This is a scrollable list. The one we'll talk about a lot next week is going to be how you get it to navigate to another page, okay? So once you've made all your changes to your button, you just want to make sure that you save that button and any changes that you've made. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and you can see now my button has all those changes that we made. So it will say,
My name is Courtney.
My name is Courtney. It has that picture of the girl, and it is highlighted using the border color and the border width. Some of the other editing options that you can do are going to be to change the button size. So if I push and hold that button in my pop-up menu, change button size is an option. So I'll change my button size and I'll make it a nice big square by making it 2 by 2. And you can see now my button's a lot bigger. I'm going to show you just quickly how easy it is to move buttons around. So I just drag and drop, and that will move my button to another page, or to another spot on the page, excuse me. Okay, so what else? Oh, we got ahead of ourselves on one slide. So we changed the button size. We can remove the button from the page by pushing and holding, and then you would hit remove button. Again, you get that disclaimer or that double check, are you sure you want to remove it? Because once it's gone until you put it back. So if I hit yes, it will remove that button, and you can now see the background of my page. If I wanted to put that button back, I can copy and paste another button, another empty button. So I'm going to copy that button, and then I'm going to paste it right here. So now I got my button back. So copy and paste is an option. Use same button. Use same button is a great feature for if you wanted to have two of the same button on two different pages. So I could think of maybe if you wanted this I am 6 years old button to be on more than one page, like maybe you wanted it to be in your calendar time under your school page, you can copy your button, and then you would go to your school page, and let's say in calendar time we wanted everybody to say how old they are. You would just find that button where you want to put it, you push and hold, and then you hit use same button. Now the advantage of using a same button and not just copying and pasting is that now every year when I change this button, so next year I'm going to be 7, when I change this button, it will also make those changes on the social page. So I only have to change the button one time, and the changes get made on all of the buttons in the vocabulary. So that's a nice little feature. The last button editing option I want to talk about is pasting the button style. So let's go back to social. And we had that My Name button that looked different because maybe we were working on greetings and introducing ourselves to people. So now I want it to look like all of my other buttons. So a really quick way I can do that is to copy a button that looks like how I want it to look. And then instead of pasting the button, because I don't want two of the same button, I'm going to paste the button style. Because if you remember, that tab that we changed to get it to look different was the button style. So that's a really quick way to get it to look the same. Editing pronunciations. So pronunciations are great for when you have unusual names, and those are going to be found in your menu. Let me come out of edit, and I'm going to go into my settings and go into my speech output and my voice menu. Now you'll see pronunciations listed there, and there are several pronunciations already set to be in your device. You can also add pronunciations. So I have a teacher, a parapro, whose name was Unica, and so we needed to add her name to it. So I push my menu button here, and it's kind of dark there at the bottom, but you'll see that I have this option to add new pronunciations. So up here you type in how the name is pronounced or spelled, Uniqua, and then at the bottom you can play with, in that pronounce as box, you can play with how it says it. So right now if we were to pronounce it, it wouldn't say it the correct way. Aniqua. So here is where you would want to play with how it says it. So we could say like Uniqua. And then you want to make sure that you save that pronunciation. So now every time this word appears, it's going to be pronounced this way. Okay, so you can play around with all those features. Hide mode. So we talked about how we can hide individual buttons when we were editing a button, but there's a quick way to do that in edit mode by going into edit mode, and then you have hide mode is available here as an option. So I'm going to click and check that. And you'll see that my menu has changed. And so now I have these two options to hide all of my buttons or to show all of my buttons. And it takes a minute, but you will see that all of my buttons turn gray. And then I can go in and pick which buttons I want to show. When I come out of edit mode, it will show me just those 4 buttons. Now the problem with these vocabularies is because they are predictive and they have a lot of pages in them. When I push this button for I, it takes me to the next page, and then I would have to go in and hide all of my buttons there as well. So you have to go through page by page to hide all of those buttons that you don't want to show. So it can be a little bit time consuming up front when you're first starting this. Now, if I wanted to show all of my buttons, I go into my menu and edit mode. I go back into hide mode, and then I can show all again by clicking that show all button. All right, and now all of my buttons are showing again. Word Finder. I definitely want to talk about Word Finder because it's a great feature when you're first getting started. So it's in your settings menu, and you're going to click on Word Finder. If I did, and then you'll need to check to make sure that it's enabled. Now, when I go out and I go back into my menu, there is Word Finder at the end. If I was looking for a word, like the word pirate, it shows me the exact buttons I need to push in order to get to that word. So in this vocabulary, I go to people, jobs, and then pirate. Similarly, if I typed in that word and I didn't find it, then I know that that word is not available in my vocabulary and I need to put it in there somewhere. The other place you can get to Word Finder is going to be from your keyboard, and the reason that this is important, you can see we've added it as a button here. The reason that this is important is for when you lock your menu, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But when I type in my word that I want to look for, say like the word fast,
F-A-S-T,
then I hit this button down here in the corner that says Find Word. And you'll see that the options, the buttons that I need to push, come up in the speech display bar up there. Now in that case, there were 2 options, so it showed me both. It flipped the interval, and that was a setting in your settings menu. You can see you can play around with your flip interval, and I think it goes all the way up to 10 seconds, okay? So you could make that longer if you wanted, 5 seconds, let's say. You could also add another button, you know, maybe to your groups page if you wanted to. You could have a Find Word button here by going in and editing your button, and then your action is going to be Find Word. So if you wanted to create more than one Find Word button in other parts of your vocabulary, you could do that. And it would work just like that button on the keyboard did. All right, locking your menu. Locking your menu is going to be in your settings menu. Again, you have to go in and make sure that it's enabled under menu lock, and it will prompt you automatically to set up a password. Now, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be a certain number of characters. You don't have to have any special characters or capitalization. It can be whatever you want, however long you want. So for simplicity, I'm just going to make it 1, 2, 3, 4 right now. And then I'm going to save that. Once you're satisfied with your password, you save it. Now, when I come out, menu lock, let me come out of edit mode. Lock is the last option on my menu, and when I push that, it will automatically lock my menu, which is great for some of our more curious kiddos because we saw how easy it was to just drag and drop buttons around on the screen. So this is a really great option. So when I go to unlock my menu, it will prompt me to put in my password, and until I put in my password, I cannot open my menu. Now, you're seeing on here, because mine is a newer device, that I have this prompt, do I want to disable kiosk too? Now remember, kiosk would let me come out of the vocabulary, so I'm going to hit no, because I don't want us to be able to come out of the vocabulary as well. If you don't have that option, again, don't worry, it just means your device is slightly older. Unlocking your menu. So I did show you just quickly about the prompt. If you ever did forget your password, there is an override password. You can see it's here at the bottom of the slide. It is the word Bosco in all caps. That will prompt you. If I'll show you real quickly what that would look like. So I put it in all caps and then I type in Bosco. And I get that message letting me know that I'm going to reset my previous password. Do I want to continue? And if I had really forgotten, I would say yes at that point. And again, there's my option about do I want to disable kiosk? And I say no because I don't want to come out of the vocabulary. All right, with the last few minutes, let's talk more in depth about kiosk mode. So kiosk mode, again, I'm going to disable mine because kiosk mode is what lets me come out of the vocabulary. If you do have this as an option on your device, what I tell my teams and my parents especially is if you have kiosk mode, take your device home, hook it up to your Wi-Fi if you have that available at home, or maybe you take it to your library, or if you're lucky, the school will let you use the school Wi-Fi. Hook it up to the Wi-Fi, and then put it back in kiosk mode. And then you will never have to worry about the updates and the downloads because you can set it to automatically download and install any updates that come out. So that way your device will constantly be updating and you don't really have to worry about it. So again, take it home, take it out of kiosk, hook it up to your Wi-Fi, and once it's hooked up, then put it back in Wi-Fi. And as long as you don't change the password or the router, it will continually hook back up to Wi-Fi whenever it comes back in contact with that network, okay? You can, if you wanted to, set a password, though, for Wi-Fi. And let me lighten my screen for you guys a little bit there. So you would have to first check your password, enable that password, and it will prompt you to set a new password. It can be the same password as your lock password. It could be different if you wanted to. So if I wanted to do 5678 for my kiosk, I could do that and have a separate password. And then you would enable your kiosk mode. Okay. So then if I do have my menu lock turned on, and you'll see when I go and lock my lock my menu, if I do pick to unlock, so unlock, and then there's that prompt again about do I want to disable kiosk. If I hit yes this time, I still get a prompt to put in a password. So if I tried doing my same password, that's the incorrect, and it won't let me unlock kiosk until I put in the right password, sorry. 5678. There we go. And so now it's unpinned. But again, for the majority of cases, you won't need to unlock kiosk if you have it hooked up to your Wi-Fi at home because it's going to do all of that updating and downloading automatically. The override password for kiosk mode. We've talked about all those things about how we unlock and disable kiosk rather. The override password for kiosk mode is Bazinga, and that will, similarly to your lock menu, will override whatever your previous password was and allow you to set a new password. All right, so we have just about a minute or two left. And I want to, we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about all of these things, but we will next week. If you're tuning in next week, we'll be able to go over some of the supports and things that we have available on our website. We're all about free resources to help you guys get started and continue the AAC journey. As I mentioned, there's a lot of video tutorials available on our website for some of the more advanced things, or even some of the things that maybe I went too quickly through and you want to hear more about them. You can go ahead and look at some of those video tutorials. And in the implementation is where you're going to find a lot of free resources too. So with that, if you guys have any questions, please type them into the chat window or let me know. And it was great training you guys today, and I hope you got a lot of good information out of it. Any questions?